Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. So it's May and we're seeing how fast everything is growing, and we're thinking about things like putting out runner beans soon, and squash and tomatoes and all of the beautiful, amazing summer vegetables. And then it suddenly kind of dawned on me that, oh, hang on a minute, there's a category that is very easy to forget. It's kind of a category that you kind of have to think about in May because it's usually the cutoff point for a lot of crops. And that, of course, is winter vegetables. The thing about winter vegetables is, yes, they do take a long time to mature, but you have vegetables that are sitting in the ground for many months that you can just go out and enjoy, also in a polytunnel. But the clue is that they take a while to mature. And so say sowing a batch of leeks in June, very often they're not going to be able to reach full size by the time it comes to winter. And you're just missing out on being able to make sure that you optimize the amount of harvest that you can get from your space. So with winter vegetables, the month to really focus on them is May. It's including all of the brassicas, purple sprouting brassica, purple sprouting broccoli, it's a purple sprouting brassica at the end of the day, kale, tree cabbage, all of those are really important. Of course, there's also Brussels sprouts. May might be ever so slightly late to get Brussels sprouts in. Then, of course, you've got your leeks that I've mentioned, really important to get your leeks in. The other ones, of course, are swede or rutabaga and parsnips. Parsnips is especially critical. They do take quite a while. They are very slow going, and part of the issue is that they're so slow going that even when you sow them, they might take 3 to 4 weeks to even appear from the ground. By that time it could be mid to late June, and then very soon the daylight starts to shorten. We're losing the hours, less chance of photosynthesis. Before you know it, autumn is here, which is why it's so important to get parsnips in. Another great crop is potatoes, and May is probably the month where I'm planting the bulk of potatoes. They're the Sapomira variety, and they are blight resistant, and so May is not too late. June is not too late for them. If you have kind of missed the boat with potatoes, just get yourself a sack of those, even like a small kind of 2.5 kilo bag. It does make a big difference. The other thing that I really like about a lot of the winter vegetables, specifically the stemmed brassicas and also the leeks, is that you don't have to start them off in a polytunnel, which can take up a lot of module space, because at the moment most of our polytunnels are going to be full of seedlings ready to go out, and May is that real fast month where there's lots being sown, a lot is going out, and so it's hard to try and find the space to maybe raise all of your leek seedlings. And so the way to get around that is by creating a seed bed. So a seed bed works for, as I said before, the leeks and the stemmed brassicas. And so effectively, you use part of a raised bed as a nursery bed or a propagation space. You sow the seeds quite thickly, cover them over, let these plants develop, and then when it comes to planting out, you simply lift up the plants, essentially bare root, and then you transplant them out to their spacings. So with stem brassicas, yes, they might be a little bit tall and a little bit skinny, but the nice thing about them is that you can plant them nice and deep, just below the first set of true leaves, and that's going to make for a nice kind of hardy, strong plant. The other thing with leeks is that you plant those deeply anyway, and both the leeks and the brassicas will show a little bit of transplant shock, a bit of wilting for maybe the first or second day after planting out, but provided that you give them enough water when transplanting, they very quickly perk back up. You then watch them grow and they really enjoy it. The other nice thing about the method of using a seed bed is that it requires far less compost, and I think far less time as well, because watering is easy, everything is in one place. It's also outside, so you've got the rain to help you. You don't need the compost for all of the seed starting, the module starting. You don't need to spend the time watering them in the polytunnel where it doesn't rain. It's just a very simple, underrated way of raising a lot of seedlings in a small space. Now, of course, not every single winter vegetable has a cut-off point in May. You could look at things like beetroot or carrots, which can stay in the ground, especially if they're kind of covered maybe with some straw or some leaves. They can stay in the ground for the majority of winter outside. Those are things that you can kind of sow directly outside in June, or transplant seedlings kind of the first half of July. That makes a big difference. And even if you just have a cold frame or some kind of really small polytunnel, the nice thing about that is in July you can sow that up with a load of salads and annual herbs, and a lot of these will overwinter nicely and provide you with a lot of harvests throughout the winter months. This year, I mean, I was harvesting coriander in January and February, and it was just in a polytunnel, and is a nice way to add extra flavour to all of the winter crops that you're growing. Just as I finished filming this video, I suddenly thought maybe it's a good idea to share some of my favourite varieties of these winter vegetables to grow. So for parsnips, usually I have a default variety which is tender and true. It's just an absolute kind of default bog standard great variety to grow. For leeks, there's loads of great varieties out there. I'm growing about 10 different varieties this year. I've been incredibly impressed by Bandit. Bandit is a great one. Basically it stands through winter really well, and even into spring. It's now May and it still hasn't bolted or run to seed. In terms of kale, there are some kale varieties which aren't actually particularly hardy that I found out. However, Red Russian is a great variety. Hungry Gap is another nice kale, and you would hope it's hardy because of its name. Another one is just dwarf green curled kale. It is really hardy. It is really productive, and you really can't go wrong with that. In terms of purple sprouting broccoli, there's a few different ones out there, but it's actually a hybrid that I'm going to recommend. It's the one that we've been growing here. It's Claret F1. It's been incredibly productive and very tasty, and we've had so much off about 9 or 10 plants, so we just keep giving it away to people every single day. For Swede, you've got Joan and Ruby. Those are two nice varieties that I like. Tweed is another one. And then for Brussels sprouts, you've got Seven Hills, which is a nice heritage variety. And this year I'm trying out Long Island Brussels sprout. It's apparently quite a nice, compact one that doesn't blow over easily. Now, in terms of the cabbages, there's many different ones that I've been trying, and I still haven't really focused on a favourite. That's one of my goals for this year. So if you have any cabbage recommendations for winter, let me know down below. And so don't make the biggest mistake in May, which is forgetting about winter veg. And if you're looking specifically at what crops to grow for self-sufficiency in May, this video right here kind of runs through the main list that I focus on during this absolutely fantastic month in the garden.